I want to tell you something that most people do not understand about coming home. They think coming home is the end of something. The deployment ends. The danger ends. The distance ends. You walk through the door and the hard part is over, and everything that was waiting for you, your family, your life, the ordinary beautiful things you were fighting to protect, is right there where you left it. That is what people think. What nobody tells you is that coming home is not the end of something. It is the beginning of the hardest part. My name is Sergeant First Class Elena Reyes. I'm 39 years old. I served 12 years in the United States Army, 3 deployments, 2 to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq. I was a combat medic. I kept people alive in places where keeping people alive required everything you had, and sometimes more than you believed you had. I was good at it. What I was not prepared for, what 12 years of service and 3 deployments and every training exercise and every briefing and every piece of preparation the Army gave me did not prepare me for, was the specific war that was waiting for me inside my own house when I came home for the last time. Not my husband. I want to be clear about that from the beginning, because this story is not what you might expect it to be. My husband Marcus had waited for me. 3 deployments, 12 years of the specific, grinding, unacknowledged work of being the spouse who stays and manages and holds things together and does not have the visible, socially comprehensible role of the soldier, but who is doing something just as hard. Marcus waited. My children waited. The war I am talking about was inside me. And winning it, finding my way through it back to the people who had waited, is the story I want to tell you today. If you are new here, please subscribe right now and drop your country and local time in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you all the way back. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, the second of 4 children, in a family that was military in its bones before I ever put on a uniform. My grandfather served in Vietnam. My father served in the Gulf War. My uncle served in Somalia. Military service was not a question in our family, it was a language. The specific language of people who understood that there are things worth protecting, and that protecting them requires people willing to put themselves between the thing and whatever threatens it. I enlisted at 22. Not because I had no other options. I had a partial scholarship to a state university that I deferred and never returned to. I enlisted because it was the thing I understood most clearly at 22, and because I was not yet ready for the quieter kind of life that university was offering. I wanted to be useful. Specifically, precisely, in a way I could feel in my body. The Army gave me that. I trained as a combat medic because I had always been the person in any crisis who moved toward rather than away. The person who showed up, who did not freeze, who could hold something terrible in her hands and remain functional while holding it. The Army recognized that in me before I fully recognized it in myself. I deployed first to Afghanistan in my 3rd year of service. I was 25 years old. I will not describe what I saw there in detail because this is not a story about the details. The details belong to me and to the people who were there, and to no one else. What I will tell you is that I came back from that first deployment different from how I left, not broken, not damaged in any way that announced itself, but changed at some level that I could feel when I pressed against it, and that I learned very quickly to stop pressing against. I met Marcus in the between time, between the first and second deployment. He was a high school math teacher in San Antonio. He was the quietest person in the room at the party where we met, not shy, but with the specific quality of someone who does not speak until they have something worth saying and then says it with complete precision. We dated for 14 months. He understood what he was getting into. Not fully, nobody fully understands until they are in it. But he knew the deployments would come. He knew the distance. He knew that he was choosing a life that had military service in its center, and that the center would not move for him. He chose it anyway. We got married the week before my second deployment. I know how that sounds. I know what people think when they hear it: rushed, unwise. The specific impulsiveness of someone leaving for somewhere dangerous and wanting to have something secured before they go. It was not that. It was to people who understood each other with unusual completeness and who decided that the understanding was worth making permanent regardless of the Timing. Marcus would tell you the same thing. We have now been married for 14 years. The second deployment was harder than the first. Not because of what happened on the second deployment was not categorically different from the first, but because I was different. I had come back from the first deployment with something in me that had been rearranged, and I had not fully examined the rearrangement before I deployed again, and the second deployment added to it in ways that I was, by then, very good at not examining. I came home from the second deployment to a wife and a new baby. Our daughter Sophia was 8 months old when I came home from the second deployment. She had been born for months after I left. Marcus had managed her entry into the world alone, labor, delivery, the first terrifying weeks of new parenthood alone. With support from family but fundamentally alone. He did not ask me to feel guilty about this. He never asked me to feel guilty about anything related to the deployments. It was simply what had happened, and he was telling me so I would understand the full shape of what I had missed. I held Sophia for a long time when I first came home. She looked at me with the specific suspicious assessment of a baby who does not yet know the face she is looking at but is deciding something about it. She decided to accept me. It took about 3 days. It took me longer to fully accept myself in the role of her mother. The specific dissonance of someone who has been in a combat zone for 9 months and is now responsible for the safety and well-being of a person who fits in the crook of your arm. That dissonance is not something the briefings prepare you for. I managed it, the way I managed most things, with discipline and with a silence about the managing that I would later understand was part of the problem. The third deployment came when Sophia was 3 and our son Miguel was 8 months old. I will say that again so it lands the way it landed when we got the orders. Sophia was 3. Miguel was 8 months old. Marcus looked at me when we read the orders and did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "How long?" 14 months, I said. He nodded. He did not cry. He did not ask me to find a way out of it. He nodded, the specific nod of a man who has made a decision about who he is going to be in this marriage and is reconfirming that decision. "We will be here," he said, "when you come back." I left in February. 14 months. What happened on that third deployment is mine. I am not going to give you the details because the details are not what this story is about, and because some things belong to the person who experienced them and do not need to be extracted and examined for an audience. What I will tell you is this: I lost 2 people on that deployment who should not have been lost. Not in the way of war where loss is expected and absorbed into their counting of a terrible arithmetic. In a different way. A specific, particular way that involved me and my hands and a decision made in a moment that lasted no time at all and that I have been inside every day since. I did the best I could. That is what I know. I also know that the best I could do was not enough to save them. Both of those things are true simultaneously, and learning to live inside the truth of both of them at once is the work of a lifetime. I am still doing that work. I expect I will be doing it for the rest of my life. I came home in April. Marcus was at the airport. Sophia was 5. She was holding a sign she had made herself, purple crayon on poster board. Her name for me in large uneven letters, Mommy, and underneath it, in Marcus's handwriting that she had asked him to add. We waited. Miguel was 2. He did not remember me. Not in the way of a child who recognizes a face. He looked at me with the specific careful assessment of a 2-year-old encountering something new and then, after approximately 45 seconds of assessment, decided I was acceptable and held up both arms to be picked up. I picked him up. I held him and Sophia simultaneously, and I felt Marcus's arms around all 3 of us from the back, and I stood in that airport holding everything I loved, and I felt nothing. Not nothing in the sense of absence. Nothing in the sense of a specific, complete numbness. The kind that descends when the nervous system has been managing something too large for too long and has run out of the capacity to feel the full weight of ordinary goodness. I smiled. I kissed my children. I held my husband. I said all the right things. I felt nothing. That was the beginning of the hardest part. The first month home was what the Army calls reintegration and what I call managed performance. I was present. I was functional. I did the things a wife and mother does: meals, bedtimes, school pickup, the maintenance of a household that had been running on Marcus alone for 14 months. I did these things with the specific efficiency of someone who has been trained to operate under any conditions and who was currently operating under the condition of her own interior blankness. Marcus watched me, not with suspicion. With the quiet, careful attention of a man who has known me for 14 years and who understood, without needing me to say it, that the woman who had come home was not entirely here yet. He did not push. He waited. He made space in the evenings, literal physical space, sitting beside me on the couch without requiring conversation, doing his own reading or grading while I sat with whatever I was sitting with. Presence without demand. I do not know if I told him in those early weeks how much that mattered. I am not sure I had access to the feeling of it mattering. But I know it now, and I am telling it to you now because I think it deserves to be said. What Marcus did in those weeks was love me without requiring me to receive it. That is a very specific and very difficult thing to do, and most people cannot do it for more than a short time. He did it for months. The children adapted faster than Marcus. Children do. They are pragmatic in a way that adults lose somewhere after childhood. Sophia accepted my presence back into her daily life within a week and organized it around me without apparent residue of the 14 months I had missed. Miguel, who had no before to compare to, simply incorporated me into his understanding of the world without needing me to explain myself. Their adaptability was a gift I was not always able to receive. The sleep was the first visible sign. I did not sleep. Not in the way that is manageable and expected after a deployment. In a way that was more comprehensive than that. Hours in the dark, lying beside Marcus with my eyes open, listening to the house breathe around me. Cataloging sounds with the specific, automatic attention of someone whose nervous system had spent 14 months in a state where cataloging sounds was the difference between survival and otherwise. The ceiling fan. The refrigerator in the kitchen. Marcus's breathing. Sophia talking in her sleep 2 rooms away. Miguel turning over in his crib. I cataloged them all. Every night. For hours. Marcus knew. He lay beside me in the dark and said nothing. And let me do what I was doing. Then came the daytime. The daytime was harder than the nights in a way that is difficult to explain, but that I think anyone who has been through something like this will understand. At night, the darkness and the quiet gave me something to attend to. The cataloging, the listening, the specific vigilance that had kept people alive in places where vigilance was necessary and which my nervous system could not simply turn off because I was now in a house in San Antonio where the greatest threat was the ceiling fan. During the day there was nothing to attend to in the same way. There was the ordinary bright dailiness of a house with 2 small children and a husband who loved me and a life that was, by every objective measure, the thing I had been fighting to protect, and I could not inhabit it. I could stand in the middle of it. I could perform the motions of inhabiting it, but the specific sensation of being present, of being here rather than watching, here from a slight remove, that was gone. I cooked dinner and watched myself cooking dinner. I helped Sophia with her drawings and watched myself helping Sophia with her drawings. I made love to my husband and watched myself making love to my husband. The watching from a remove was the thing that frightened me most. Not the sleeplessness, not the specific intrusions of the deployment into my daytime, the sounds, the images, the things I saw when I was not expecting to see them. The remove was what frightened me because it was the thing that made me feel most like I was losing. Not what had happened to me, but who I was. I was losing myself. That is what I understood on a morning in June 3 months after I came home, when I was standing in the kitchen making coffee and Sophia came in and asked me something simple and ordinary, and I turned to look at her. And for one moment, just one, I did not know who she was, not truly did not know. Not amnesia, but a moment's delay. A fraction of a second in which my brain had to search for the answer to who this child was that was longer than it should have been. I put my coffee down. I went to the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the bathtub for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and I called the VA. I want to tell you about that call, because it was the call that Changed everything, and I want it to be said clearly. I called the VA crisis line. Not because I was in crisis, in the way people typically understand that word. I was not in danger. I was not planning to hurt myself. I called because I had spent 3 months managing something I could no longer manage alone, and because standing in my kitchen not recognizing my daughter for a fraction of a second was the specific thing that told me the loan had to end. The person who answered was a veteran himself. He had been a Marine. He understood, without me having to build up to it or explain the context, exactly what I was describing. He listened. He did not rush me or redirect me or recite a script at me. He said, "You called. That matters. That took something." I said, "I don't know if I can do this." He said, "You already are. You're doing it right now." He connected me with a VA therapist who specialized in combat-related trauma. I had an appointment within the week. Therapy. I want to be honest about therapy the way I have tried to be honest about everything else in this story. I resisted it. Not the appointment. I showed up to the appointment because I had made it, and I do not break appointments. But the process. For the first 6 weeks I showed up and I answered questions and I described things with the specific clinical precision of someone who has been trained to assess and report, and I did not let any of it touch me. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Patricia Webb, who had worked with combat veterans for 20 years and who had the specific quality of someone who has heard everything and is not frightened by any of it, saw what I was doing. She said, after 6 weeks, "Sergeant Reyes, you are giving me the debrief. I need you to give me the truth." I looked at her. "The debrief is accurate," I said. "The debrief is accurate and incomplete," she said. "You are telling me what happened. I need you to tell me what it felt like." I had not told anyone what it felt like. Not Marcus. Not my parents. Not the chaplain who had visited after the 3rd deployment. Not anyone. I sat in that office and I understood that the not telling was part of what was keeping the remove in place. That the watching from a distance that had been separating me from my own life was sustained, in part, by the not telling. I started telling. It took many sessions. Not one revelation but many small ones. The specific, patient work of bringing things from the place where I had stored them into the room where they could be examined. Dr. Webb did not flinch from any of it. That mattered more than I can say. I want to tell you about the night I told Marcus. Not everything. I have not told Marcus everything, and I do not believe I owe anyone everything. But the things that were most directly affecting what was between us. The remove. The watching. The fraction of a second in the kitchen. We were sitting on the back porch. A Saturday in August. The children were asleep. Marcus had a glass of iced tea. I had water. He was waiting. He was always waiting, in those months. With the specific patient quality of someone who understood that the thing would come when it was ready and who was not going to accelerate its readiness by demanding it. I said, "I need to tell you some things." He said, "Okay." I told him about the remove. About watching myself from a slight distance. About the fraction of a second in the kitchen with Sophia. About the 3 months of managing it alone before the call. He listened without speaking. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "How long have you been carrying this without telling me?" 3 months, I said. "Since I got home, Elena," he said. And then he stopped. I looked at him. His face was doing the thing it does when he is feeling something very large and is deciding how to hold it. "I watched you," he said. "Every day. I watched you go through the motions, and I knew something was wrong, and I did not know how to ask. I did not want to push. I did not want to make it worse." "You didn't make it worse," I said. "The space you gave me was what I needed. Until it wasn't enough anymore. What do you need now?" He said. I thought about that honestly. "I need you to know," I said. "And now you know." He reached over and took my hand. We sat on that porch for the rest of the evening. He did not fix anything. There was nothing to fix. He was just there. That was everything. I want to tell you where we are now. I am 2 years into a different life. Not a new one. The same life, the same people, the same marriage, and the same children, and the same house in San Antonio. But a different version of it. I left active service 14 months after I came home. Not because I was pushed out. My record was clean and my service was honorable, and I left because I chose to. Because I understood, after the sessions with Dr. Webb and the months of slowly returning to myself, that the specific version of usefulness that the Army offered me was no longer the right container for what I had become. I did not know what the right container was for several months. Then I found it. I work now with a veteran support organization in San Antonio. Not as a therapist, I am not a therapist. As a peer support specialist. Someone who has been where the veterans who come to us have been. Someone who understands what they are carrying, not from a textbook but from 12 years of carrying something myself. I sit with them the way Dr. Webb sat with me. I do not flinch. That is what I have to offer. The not flinching. The being there. The specific quality of someone who has been in the room and is still standing. I also teach Sophia and Miguel something that my own parents did not have the language to teach me. I teach them that strength is not the absence of need. That asking for help is not weakness. That the bravest thing a person can do is say out loud, I am not okay, and I need someone to know. Sophia is 7 now. Last month she came home from school and told me that her friend was sad because something had happened at home and she had not known what to do. I said, what did you do? She said, I sat with her. I didn't try to fix it. I just sat with her. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. That was exactly right. I said, she is 7 years old. She already knows what I spent 12 years learning. Before you go, I want to say something directly to anyone listening who is wearing a uniform or who has worn one. You have been trained to be the person who moves toward rather than away. To be the person who holds something terrible and remains functional. To manage and suppress and continue operating under conditions that most people cannot imagine. That training saved lives. Maybe your own, maybe others, but it does not serve you when you come home. When you come home, the moving toward is different. The thing to move toward is the people waiting for you, and the help that is available, and the truth of what you are carrying that you have been trained to suppress, but that will find its way out. Eventually, in one form or another. Move toward it on your own terms before it moves toward you on its own. You called for help in places where calling for help meant calling in a position. In places where the coordinates mattered and the response mattered and the stakes were something you understood. Precisely. The stakes are the same here. The coordinates are your own. Call. Drop the word medic in the comments if this story reached something real in you. And if you are new here, subscribe. Every single day I share a new story about family, about service, about the people who came home and found their way back. I will see you in the next one. Kayla's Dark Truth.